Alright, hello world, welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be doing our Python tutorial. So it's going to be part 2 in our Python tutorial series. And so this is just what we did in part 1, right? If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I will link the playlist into the description down below so you can check that out. But part 1, Rico just experimented with print and just print some stuff onto our screen. And we also learn how to, run a Python file. You can simply execute Python, and on the MacBook, you prompt to write Python 3, and then the file name. So since I organize it into a folder, I'd write part1 / that just means a folder, and then I can get the file. So then you can see it will do what it says and will print all these out to the console. All right, and when we type clear, it's going to clear the console. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's learn a little bit new today in this video. And what we're going to primarily be focusing on is something called variable. Okay, variable. And notice how this entire line is green and it begins with a hashtag. So that's what we call comment in Python. So comment is basically for human to read it. It can be anything. But it will not going to get interpreted by the Python interpreter. And if you are writing some code, you don't want that code to run, you can comment them out using hashtag. You can put a hashtag in front of the line to signify that this is a comment. Okay, so let's see. So I guess the first thing we'll do is let's just recall what is a variable. So if you think back to your Algebra 1 class, or Math 1, Integrated Math 1. You probably remember the idea of a variable. Basically, you're just given like a letter, for example, x, and we can set it to a value, 5. So then in this case, x is just 5, right? X and 5, they are interchangeable in that sense. So it's basically the same thing in programming language or in Python as well. We can give variables. Variable is just a way to store values. Okay, so if you think variable like a box, right? You can just put something into that box. All right, you can put something into that box, and you're putting a value into the box. And x is just the name of the box, for example, right? In this case, I just called a variable x and stored 5, integer 5 into it, as we'll see whether these integer or so-called integer, these why do they matter? But that will be a later tutorial. Anyway, so we can also print out a variable value by just writing something like this: print parenthesis x, and then we can run the file again, like that. So as you can see, we printed out the value x equals 5. All right, x equals 5. Perfect. So, that's great and all, but let's say if I want to make it more useful, right? Let's say I want to make it more useful. So let's define a variable called lucky number. And in here, I'm just going to store my lucky number in it. My lucky number, let's just say it's 10. Okay, let's just say it's 10. Okay, so before we go on, just a few syntactical things. When you're naming a variable, it must begin with a letter. I believe it must begin with a letter, uppercase or lowercase, or an underscore. It cannot begin with a number. Okay, otherwise it's going to give you a syntax error. We are naming multiple. When your variable name has multiple words, you will usually connect them using underscore. So this is what we call snake case. Basically, all of the letters are lowercase, and it's connected by underscore for different words. Okay, yeah. So that's snake case. That's a variable naming syntax we use in Python. You might, if you program in other programming language like Java, for example, they use camel case. So you write a variable like that, right? But this is Python. Python uses snake case. Okay, so now we define lucky num, and we set the value 10. So feel free to define your variable as well, and then put your lucky number in it. And in this case, let's just print out lucky num. As you can see, 10 is printed on the screen. All right, perfect. So now let's define a few more variables. Let's define a variable called name. And notice how when you're defining a variable called name, I write a quotation mark after the equal sign. And then I will put my name in the quotation marks. The reason I did that is because this is what we call a string literal. All right, this is what we call string literal. This is really important because programming language, it doesn't recognize text, so to speak. It doesn't. So if you just type that, it will think that this is a variable, right? Because notice how the variable name don't have quotation mark around it. It will think that this is just another variable. By adding quotation mark around it, you're telling it, no, it's not a variable, it's just text. It's just text. So that's why we have to add quotation mark around these text and characters. It's really important. If you don't do it, it will get syntax error. All right. So let's go ahead and print out the name as well. Perfect. So now as you can see, I got my name printed and I got my lucky num printed. Okay, so I believe in part 1, we did some simple string concatenation stuff, right? Simple string concatenation, recall, that's just how you can add different multiple strings together, right? So let's do the same thing here. Let's say I want to print out the sentence, hello, my name is, and whatever your name, right? Whatever your name is, and my lucky number is, and your lucky number. Right. So we want to use variable. So notice how there's bracket. We want to replace a bracket with variables. So why don't you pause the video and feel free to try it out. Try and see if you can use print statement and use string concatenation with variables to print this sentence out. Okay, so to do this, right, you might think we have to do this. Print hello, my name is, and then we can, what's our name, and my lucky number is, and then we can add lucky num. Right, so you might think we have to do that, but when we run the code, you will see we actually got an error. All right, we actually got an error. So I believe this is the first error we saw in this series, but don't worry, there will be more errors to come. We will try to explore all different sort of errors we'll see in Python, so or at least the built-ins and generic errors, so you will know how to debug them. Okay, so this is one of the generic error and one of the most common error. It's called type error. All right, so if you look at the Python error message, it will always begin with traceback, most recent call last. So it will basically, I believe is the most recent call will be the first. Since we only have one line that calls the error, it's not that obvious, but when the code gets a little bit more complicated, you will see traceback. It will actually show you, basically step by step of what line caused the error. So anyway, so here, then it's just file, where is it located, which line is it, right? And we have the actual line here, and then it's the actual error message. It's type error, can only concatenate stir, not int to star. So what does that mean? Feel free to take a guess, or write in the comment down below. But basically, this just means that we're trying to concatenate an integer with string, which doesn't work. We can't do that. Python doesn't know how to concatenate string with integers, or integer with string. So how do we fix that? Well, this is where we're going to do something called typecasting. So basically, this is just a way to convert from a type to another. So basically, what we need to do is we need to convert lucky num from an integer to string. Now, there's one way to do it, is obviously just add quotation mark around it. And that will, as you can see, fix everything. But we may not necessarily want to do that, because we might want to use lucky num, right? We might want to use lucky num in later operation. For example, maybe we want to add 1 to lucky num for some reason. And when it's a string, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. So we still want to keep it integer. We just want to sort of like temporarily typecast it. So to do that, all we need to do is just put lucky num around the stir statement. Okay, the stir statement. For now, I can just think stir as a statement. Later tutorial will go in depth of what is stir, what is print exactly. But for now, stir is just something we can use to convert anything, literally anything, to string. So now if we run this again, as you can see, now it says, hello, my name is whatever your name is, and my lucky number is whatever your lucky number is, without errors. Okay, so basically this error just showed us, again, to recap, when you are adding different types together, you need to make sure they're all concatenated, they're all typecasted to all the appropriate types. For example, when we try to concatenate integer with string, make sure you typecast integer to string first using stir. Okay. All right. So that's that. Now let's go ahead and focus on type a little bit. So this typecasting. So what exactly is type? So if you remember from part 1, I said Python is a programming language that doesn't really care about type. All right, and it's because of that it's really easy to use because beginner don't have to worry about types. But types still exist, as you can see here. Types still exist. So what exactly is type? Well, it's really just what type of value is, basically. So now, to figure out what type a value is or a variable storing, we can use, again, print to print something onto the screen, but we will use type. This type statement will be able to show us what type is it. For example, I'm really curious what type is x. Is this variable x holding? And if we run it, as you can see, it will say class int. All right, it will say class int. So for now, just ignore the class. We'll go in depth about what's class in later tutorials. But focus on this int part. This tells us what type is it. Int stands for integer. So that's just telling us, okay, this variable x is holding an integer value. Right? We can do the same thing with lucky num. And we can do the same thing with name. Right? As you can see, lucky num is an integer as well, and name is a string. Right? So if you forgot, string is just a chunk of text. Right? A series of characters, a chunk of text wrapped around quotation mark. Okay, so now that's really fun. But now let's go ahead and focus on what you can actually do or use with variables. So we're going to create a new file and we're just going to call it operations.py. And in here we're going to explore how Python can behave like a basic calculator, so to speak. So let's say I have two variables defined. Let's say I have a num1 and it's just going to be 5. Num2, let's make that 3. Okay, let's make that 3. So we could do different operations on it, like what we can do with a calculator. For example, we can print out the sum. Right, we can print out the sum, and in here we can just say print out the sum, and we can write num1 plus num2. Right. So again, we need to type it in a stir because num1 plus num2, that's going to give us an integer value. Right? You're adding two integers together, so it will give you an integer value. Therefore, you need to typecast it to a stir in order to be concatenated with a string here. So if we run it, so now we're going to run a new file rather than main.py. It's going to be called operations.py. And as you can see, sum, it's 8. Right? 5 plus 3 is 8. So you can do different operations. For example, difference, num1 minus num2. As we would expect, 5 minus 3 is 2. And we can say product, num1 asterisk num2 or times num2. If you don't know where asterisk is located, it's shift 8 asterisk. So if we run it again, as you can see, product is 15. 5 times 3 is 15. Now I guess we get to a little bit interesting part. Now we have quotient, right? 5 divided by 3. So before I run this, take a guess. What do you think the output will be? Now, if you have prior programming experience before in another programming language like Java, you might think 5 divided by 3, that gives you 1, because it always truncates the decimal part down. However, Python behaves a little bit differently. Python will just straight up give you a decimal number, even when you're doing integer, right? Even when you're doing 2 integers divided by each other. And in this case, you can see it goes pretty far. It's like, what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 decimal place. And then it will round normally, round traditionally, right? That's how division works in Python, normal division. Now, let's say you really care about integer division. We could do double slash, and now we'll do quotient, but we'll pretend it's an integer. So that will do the division that you might see in other programming language, where it truncates just a decimal part, and it will just return you the integer part. Okay. By the way, when you're doing num divided by num, when you're dividing numbers, and that will give you a decimal point value, or just decimal point value in general, and that's what we call float. Okay, that's what we call float. So, for example, for type, we can also just check a value directly. For example, 5.3. So, float is just another fancy way to say it's a decimal place number. Okay, as long as I have a decimal point, it will be float, right? Even if it's something like 3.0, it's still float, right? It's still float because it's a decimal point number. So yeah, we'll explore how integer and decimal works, but generally they sort of behave same in Python. Okay, so now we've seen 5 most common operations: sum, difference, product, quotient, and integer division. So now let's see, we'll just do a couple more common operation. For example, I think we'll just do one more, or 2 more actually. So one of them is exponent. Let's say you want to raise num1 to num2's power. So how would you do that? You will actually just change this to double asterisk, and that will raise it to the power. So in this case, what that will do is I will say, okay, num1 raised to the power of num2. So 5 raised to the power of 3. Now if we run this again, with operations.py, as you can see, the exponent, as we would expect, is 125. Right? 5 to the power of 3 is 125. And finally, there's another common operation in programming, but not mass, generally speaking. It's called modulus. All right, or mod for short, modulo. So what that will do is that will give you the remainder of. All right, and its symbol is %sign. So what does that mean? Well, how modulo work is that it's just going to divide the number, but rather than give you the actual results, it's going to give you the remainder, right? So if you run this, mod will give us 2, because 5 divided by 3 will give you remainder 2. So that's how mod work. Okay, so these are 7 most common operations in Python, and how would you write them? Sum, difference, product, quotient, integer division, exponent, and mod. Okay, so these are the most common operation or calculation you will do in Python. Of course, there's more complicated ones. For example, you might want to take the square root of something. That, however, requires more. We're going to need to import, I believe, external libraries for that. So we will not do it until when we learn how does the library work in Python. All right. Anyway, so as you can see, that's the common operation. I guess just to do a quick recap, this is how we can define variables. We can print out the value of variables. When we concatenate, make sure the type is the same. We can typecast them to appropriate types, and we can do and then we can use this type statement to print out what type is the value, right? What type is a value, or what type of value is a variable holding. Okay, so now let's look at this exercise really quick. So I took a screenshot from Python's Crash Course 2nd edition. That's a pretty good textbook, or not really a textbook, I guess, but like a resource. So this is like the quick challenge. I just took a screenshot of it. So feel free to do the challenge. I will be doing this as well, but feel free to pause the video and do the challenge. Okay, so it asks you to write a separate program to accomplish each of these exercises. Save each program with a file name that follows standard Python conventions using lowercase letters and underscores, such as simple underscore message.py and simple messages.py. I guess for the sake of the exercise and for the sake of time, I'm not going to really change the name that much. I'm just going to put them under one file, exercise.py. So 2.1 simple message is just store a message in a variable and then print out that message, right? So all we have to do is really just write a variable name equals a variable value, right? That's the three things you need to define a variable. Again, that's the name of the variable, equal sign, and the value of the variable. So in this case, I can write hello from Northern California, right? And then I can print the message out. Exercise.py, right? And you can see it will print out the value, right? So that's exercise 2.1 or 2-1. Now 2-2 asks to store a message in a variable, print that message, and then change the value of your variable to a new message, and then print the new message, right? So it turns out that we can reassign value in variable as well. And that's why I use this exercise to show you that. So we can actually redefine a variable like this. Message equals, for example, hello from United States of America, right? So we can redefine a variable value like this. Variable name equals variable value. All right, we can redefine a variable like this. And then we can print out the message again. So then so the first message will print out this part, and then the second print will print out this part, right? So this is when the order of how Python execute matter. It executes from top to bottom, left to right. So basically, when if you put line 5, for example, before you redefine a variable, then all you will see is just hello from Northern California twice, because you're really printing out the same message. So that's why we'll put it here, so that we can actually see new values. Okay. All right. So that's the solution to these exercises. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. Okay. Last thing for this video is I had a couple debugging challenge here. So this will be your, I guess, quote-unquote homework. We'll go over it in the next tutorial, but I will also upload them to GitHub, which is a source code, like a hosting service, where you can just copy the code, and your challenge just be fix the code. All right, if it has a bug, find the bug, fix it. Okay, and yeah, so that's pretty much it in this video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment down below. But as always, stay safe and have a great rest of your day. That was me, out, and I will see you in the next tutorial.